Good day, everyone. So, this is the continuous topic of Chapter 11, which is reported by Hafida Pragmatics. So, the study of pragmatics looks at how we deal with those aspects of language that go beyond the simple meaning of what we hear and say. One obvious way of doing this is by making inferences. So, pragmatics is concerned with how we get things done with language and how we work out what the purpose is behind the speaker's utterance. The study of pragmatics can be divided into two interrelated topics. First is how we, as hearers and speakers, go beyond the literal meaning of what we hear to make and draw inferences. For example, if I say, "Can you pass the salt?" I am usually not really asking you whether you have the ability to pass the salt. It is an indirect, polite way of saying, "Please pass the salt." The second topic is how we maintain conversations. To get things done, we have to collaborate. So, for example, we clearly do not want to talk all at the same time. There are three forces possessed by a sentence. Austin, 1976. First is the locutionary force, which means the literal meaning of the utterance. A locutionary force, what the speaker is trying to get done with the utterance. The last one is the percolationary force, the effect the utterance actually has on the action and beliefs of the listener. Making inference in conversations. So we have seen that inferences play an important part in understanding text and are just as important in conversation. We make inferences not just from what people say, but also from how they say it, and even from what they do not say. In conversation, though we have an additional resource, we can ask the other person. Conversation is a cooperative act. Speech acts, Austin and Shirley. When we speak, we have goals, and it is the listener's task to discover those goals. According to Austin, 1962 to 1976 and Shirley, 1969, every time we speak, we perform a speech act. That is, we're trying to get things done with our utterances. So, Austin in 1976 began with the goal of exploring sentences containing performative verbs. So, these verbs perform an act in their very utterance, such as, "I hereby pronounce you man and wife." So, as long as the circumstances are appropriate, such as that I have the authority to do so, such circumstances are called the felicity conditions. Categories of Speech Act, Shirley, 1969-1975. According to her, when we speak, we make speech acts. Every speech act falls into one of five categories. First, the representatives. The speaker is asserting a fact and conveying his or her belief that a statement is true. For example, Boris rides a bicycle. Second categories is directives. The speaker is trying to get the listener to do something. In asking the questions, "Does Boris ride a bicycle?" So the speaker is trying to get the hearer to give information. Commissives, the speaker commits him or herself to some future course of action. So if Boris doesn't ride a bicycle, I will give you a present. Expressives. The speaker wishes to reveal his or her psychological state. For example, I'm sorry to hear that Boris only rides a bicycle. The last one category is the declaratives. The speaker brings out about a new state of affairs. Boris, you're fired for riding a bicycle. Direct speech acts are straightforward utterances where the intention of the speaker is revealed in the words, and the indirect speech acts require some work in the part of the listener. The most famous example is Can you pass the salt? As analyzed earlier, speech acts can become increasingly indirect. Is that salt at your end of the table? To this food is a bit bland. Often, when increasing politeness, the less conventional they are, the more computational work is required by the listener. Gibbs 1986. Indirectness serves a function. It is an important mechanism for conveying politeness in conversation. So, the meanings of indirect speech acts are not always immediately apparent. Shirley proposed a two-stage mechanism for computing the intended meaning. First, the listener tries the literal meaning to see if it makes sense in context. Only if it does not do they additional work of finding a non-literal meaning. There is opposing one-stage model where people derive the non-literal meaning either instead of or as well as the literal one. The evidence is conflicting, but certainly the non-literal meaning is understood as fast or faster than the literal meaning. For example, you're a fine friend, then the literal sense in a context where that was appropriate. Greece Maxims propose that in conversation, speakers and listener cooperate to make the conversation meaningful and purposeful. That is, we adhere to a cooperative principle. To comply with this, according to Greece, you must make your conversational contribution such as is required. When it is required, this is achieved by use of four conversational maxims. First is maxim of quantity. Make your contribution as informative as is required but no more. Maxim of quality. Make your contribution true. Do not say anything that you believe to be false or for which you lack sufficient evidence. The third is maxim of relevance. Make your contribution relevant to the aims of the conversation. And the last one is maxim of manner. Be clear, avoid obscurity, ambiguity, wordiness, and disorder in your language. The structure of conversation. There are two different approaches to analyzing the way in which conversation are structured. Discourse analysis uses the general methods of linguistics. It aims to discover the basic units of discourse and the rules that relate them. The most extreme version of this is the attempt to find a grammar for conversation in the same way as there are sentence and story grammars. Conversation analysis was pioneered by ethnomethodologists who examine social behavior in its natural setting. The data consists of tape recording and more laterally videos of transcripts of naturally occurring conversation. The neuropsychology of a text and discourse processing. Much less is known about the neuropsychology of text processing than about the neuropsychology of many other language processes. This is because text processing and semantic integration really comprise many processes, at least some of which are not specific to language and involve much of the cortex. It is much more straightforward to track down the effects of brain damage on modular processes. Many types of brain damage will lead to some impairment of comprehension ability. For example, people with receptive aphasia have difficulty in understanding the meaning of words. This obviously impairs their ability to follow coherent text and conversation.